What would you do if the whole world told you to ignore someone? Would you keep walking like
Please
everyone
help!
else?
Somebody
Or
help
would you
her!
stop, even if helping that person could cost you the little you had left? In a forgotten corner of town, where dust clung to bare feet and hunger sat inside almost every home, a young fruit seller made one decision that changed not only her life, but the future of everyone connected to her. She was poor. She was tired. And on that day, she had every reason to think only about herself. But when an old woman appeared by the roadside, weak, shaking, and unwanted, this young girl did something no one expected. She gave. She protected. She stayed. And 3 weeks later, just before sunrise, a black SUV rolled to a stop outside her tiny hut. What happened next left the entire neighborhood speechless. This is the story of Amina. And before this story ends, you will understand why kindness is sometimes the most expensive thing a poor person can offer, and the most powerful thing they can ever own. Amina was 21 years old, but hardship had already written years on her face that did not belong there. She lived with her mother, Mama Zuri, and her little brother Imani in a narrow mud brick hut at the edge of McKenna village, a place where rain leaked through roofs, smoke blackened walls, and hope was something people spoke about more than they saw. Every morning before the first rooster crowed, Amina was awake. She swept the front yard. She fetched water from the borehole half a kilometer away. She boiled cassava, washed oranges, arranged bananas in a woven tray, and prepared herself for another day at the roadside market. While other girls her age posted smiling photos from college hostels and birthday dinners, Amina spent her mornings calculating how many pieces of fruit she needed to sell to buy medicine for her mother's cough and pay part of her brother's school levy. Still, there was something Amina refused to let poverty steal from her: her dream. She wanted to become a nurse. Not because it sounded impressive, not because she thought it would make her rich, but because when her father died 3 years earlier, it was not death alone that broke their home. It was helplessness. He had complained of chest pain for 2 days. The nearest clinic had demanded money before treatment. They had begged, borrowed, waited, and prayed. By the time anyone touched him, it was too late. Amina never forgot the emptiness in her mother's eyes that night, and from that day on, she promised herself that if God ever gave her the chance, she would become the kind of person who did not let the poor die while waiting to be noticed. So every evening, after the market closed and the smoke of roadside grills floated into the dark, Amina studied old science books under a rechargeable lamp that worked only when the battery decided to be merciful. She had already passed her entrance exams for a nursing institute in town, but admission meant nothing without fees. And fees meant money. And money, in Amina's world, moved slower than pain. Still, she kept going. Because sometimes, hope is not loud. Sometimes, it is just a tired girl waking up again. That Tuesday began like any other. The sky was pale. The road was busy. Conductors shouted destinations. Motorcycle riders argued over fares. Women balanced baskets on their heads. And children chased one another between stalls as if hunger had not followed them from home. Amina set up her tray near the bus stop, the place where office workers sometimes bought fruit on their way to town. "Sweet oranges, fresh bananas, ripe pawpaw," she called, forcing energy into her voice. Business was slow. By mid-morning, she had sold barely enough to cover lunch. Then the weather changed. A thick wind dragged dust through the road, and people rushed to gather their goods before the rain arrived. That was when Amina noticed her. An old woman stood near the broken fence across the road. Her wrapper was faded. Her headscarf looked damp and heavy. She leaned on a stick with trembling hands, as though each breath required permission. At first, Amina thought the woman was just another traveler resting. But then she saw something else. The woman's eyes were unfocused. Her feet were unsteady. And before anyone could react, she collapsed. Her body hit the ground hard. Gasps rose around the roadside. A young man looked, shook his head, and walked away. A woman selling fried yam muttered, "These old beggars bring trouble." A conductor laughed and said, "Don't touch her. If she dies, police will come and hold you." Someone else whispered that perhaps she was cursed. Another person said she was pretending. Within seconds, the crowd had done what crowds often do best. They turned a human emergency into public entertainment. Amina stared for only a moment. Then she dropped the money in her hand, ran across the road, and knelt beside the old woman. "Ma, can you hear me?" The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her forehead burned like fire. Amina looked around desperately. "Please, help me carry her." Nobody moved. "Please!" she shouted again. Two schoolboys finally stepped forward, not out of courage, but because Amina's voice carried the kind of urgency that shames hesitation. Together, they lifted the woman and brought her under the shade of a nearby shop. The first drops of rain began to fall. Amina tore open one of her sachets of water and wet the woman's lips. "Ma, stay with me. Don't sleep." One of the boys said, "Take her to the clinic near the junction." Amina knew the clinic. She also knew what it meant. Payment first. Always. Still, there was no time to think. She gathered her tray, pushed it into the care of the fried yam seller, and half supported, half carried the old woman toward the clinic through the rain. By the time they arrived, both of them were soaked. The nurse at the desk looked up lazily. "What happened?" "She fainted on the roadside. She has high fever. Please help her." "Where is her family?" "I don't know." "Who will pay?" Amina swallowed. "Please, treat her first." The nurse sighed, annoyed by compassion as though it were an inconvenience. After several tense minutes, a clinical officer examined the woman and said it was severe dehydration, fever, and exhaustion. She needed injections, medication, and observation. Then came the bill. It was more than Amina had earned in 3 full market days. Her fingers tightened around the small cloth purse tied beneath her blouse. Inside that purse was money she had been saving toward her first nursing school installment. Not enough to solve her future, but enough to help this stranger survive today. Her mind raced. If she spent it, she would fall behind again. If she didn't, the old woman might be sent away. The officer tapped the table impatiently. "Are you paying or not?" Amina closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened the purse. "I'm paying." As she counted the notes, her hands shook. Not because she regretted it, but because deep down she knew exactly what it cost. The woman was treated. She slept for nearly 2 hours. Amina stayed by her bed, missing the busiest part of the market day. Now and then, the nurse gave her a strange look, as if to ask why a poor girl would waste time and money on someone whose name she did not even know. When the old woman finally woke, she seemed confused. Her voice was weak. Where am I?" "In a clinic, Ma. You collapsed." The old woman turned slowly and studied Amina's face. "You brought me here?" Amina nodded. "Yes." "Why?" It was such a strange question that Amina almost smiled. Because you needed help. The woman stared longer than necessary, as if weighing that answer against something private and invisible. Later, when the clinic discharged her, Amina asked the question she had been dreading. Ma, where do you live? Should I call your family? The woman looked down at her hands. I have no one nearby. Then where were you going? The old woman hesitated before answering. To an old structure beyond the timber yard. I rest there sometimes. Amina understood immediately. It was not a home. It was one of those abandoned, half-built places where the forgotten slept when the weather allowed them to exist. The rain was still falling. The woman could barely stand. Amina imagined leading her there, leaving her alone, and walking away. Something inside her refused. Come with me, she said. The woman looked surprised. To where? My home. No, child, I will not be a burden. You are sick. I will manage. Amina shook her head. No, not today. So once again, with one arm around the old woman and worry sitting heavily in her chest, Amina walked home through muddy paths and whispering stairs. When they reached the hut, Mama Zuri was outside coughing into a cloth. The sight before her made her freeze. Amina, who is this? Her name, actually, I don't know yet, Amina admitted. She collapsed at the market. I took her to the clinic. She has nowhere safe to stay. Mama Zuri looked from the stranger to her daughter. There was fatigue in her face. Real fatigue. The kind that comes from years of carrying too much with too little. But there was also something else. Recognition. Because poor people know what abandonment looks like. And even when they cannot fix it, they can still recognize it. Without another question, Mama Zuri stepped aside. Bring her in. Inside the hut, they laid a mat near the warmest wall. Imani, who was only 10, stared with wide eyes but said nothing. Amina prepared thin millet porridge. Mama Zuri heated water with herbs. That night, the rain beat against the roof, and their home, already too small for 3, made room for a 4th. Only later, after the old woman fell asleep, did Mama Zuri ask the hardest question. How much did you spend at the clinic? Amina looked away. Some of my savings. How much? Amina told her. Mama Zuri sat down heavily. For a while, the only sound in the hut was rainwater dripping into a metal bowl in the corner. Then her mother said quietly, My daughter, your heart is too good for this world. Amina braced herself for anger. Instead, Mama Zuri touched her face. But may God never let that goodness destroy you. Amina leaned into her mother's hand. I couldn't leave her there. I know, Mama Zuri whispered. That is why I am both proud and afraid. The old woman gave her name the next day. She said she was Mama Nadira. No surname, no clear history. Just Mama Nadira. Over the next few days, strength slowly returned to her body. But even as she recovered, she remained observant. Very observant. She noticed how Amina woke before everyone. How Mama Zuri sometimes pretended she had eaten so Imani could take the larger share. How Amina stitched torn fruit sacks at night to save money. How the family prayed before meals, even when the meal was too small to deserve the name. And she noticed something else. No one in that hut complained in front of her. They were not performing kindness. They were living it. One afternoon, Amina returned from the market with only a few unsold bananas and slumped down near the doorway. Mama Nadira asked gently. Bad day? Amina laughed without humor. These days are all cousins. The old woman smiled faintly. Then why do you still smile at customers? Because sorrow doesn't increase sales. Mama Nadira watched her for a moment. You are educated? A little. You speak like someone who has sat in classrooms. Amina peeled a bruised orange. I finished secondary school. I want to become a nurse. Want? Yes. And what stops you? Money. There was no shame in the answer, just fact. Mama Nadira nodded slowly. Would you still help people if no one ever knew your name? Amina looked confused. I think so. Even if helping them delayed your own progress. Amina paused longer this time. Then she said something that surprised even herself. I don't know if delaying goodness makes life easier. Sometimes it only makes regret longer. Mama Nadira lowered her eyes. That night, she did not sleep quickly. She lay awake, staring at the roof, listening to the little sounds of poverty around her. The cough, the turning mat, the rustle of worn cloth, the far barking of dogs. And in the darkness, a tear slipped from the corner of her eye. By the 5th day, the neighborhood had heard about the old woman staying with Amina's family. And, as always, people talked. Some said she was a witch. Some said she was a thief pretending to be weak. Some mocked Amina for spending school money on stray people. One woman even came by and said, kindness is good, but wisdom is better. One day this world will teach your daughter a lesson. Mama Zuri answered calmly. If the lesson is to become hard because others are suffering, then we would rather remain foolish. The woman left offended, but her words lingered. That evening, as Amina prepared for the next day's market, she found Mama Nadira folding the same wrapper she had arrived in. You are leaving? Amina asked. I have already troubled you enough. You are not strong yet. I cannot stay forever. Amina sat beside her. No, but stay until you can walk well. Mama Nadira looked into her eyes. Why do you insist? Amina shrugged softly. Maybe because if it were my mother outside somewhere, I would pray someone else insisted. For the first time since arriving, the old woman reached for Amina's hand and squeezed it. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of many unspoken things. The next morning, Amina woke later than usual. The place on the mat was empty. Mama Nadira was gone. At first, Amina thought she had stepped outside. Then she checked the yard. Nothing. The path. Nothing. The neighbor's side. Nothing. Only the early wind and footprints already fading into dust. On the mat lay one object, a small beaded bracelet, old but carefully woven. Amina picked it up and stared at it. That was all. No note, no message, no goodbye. Imani said maybe she had gone back to wherever she came from. Mama Zuri said perhaps that was best. But Amina felt something she could not explain. Not anger, not exactly sadness, just emptiness. As though a chapter had closed before she understood why it had opened. Still, life did not pause for unanswered questions. Bills remained. The market continued. The nursing school deadline approached. Amina pushed the bracelet into her pocket and returned to the world. But now trouble came faster. 2 days later, their landlord's brother arrived, demanding late rent. A supplier refused to give Amina fruit on credit. Mama Zuri's cough worsened, and a letter came from the nursing institute reminding Amina that if the deposit was not paid by the end of the month, her place would be given to another student. That night, after everyone slept, Amina stepped outside and looked at the sky. She felt something rare for her: defeat. She had worked, prayed, sacrificed, and still life stood over her like a giant, unmoved. Quietly, she whispered, "God, I don't regret helping her. I just don't understand what happens to people like us after we do the right thing." No thunder answered. No miracle appeared. Only silence. But sometimes silence is not absence. Sometimes it is just the part of the story before everything changes. 3 weeks passed. Then came the morning that McKenna Village would talk about for years. It was still dark when Amina heard engines. Not one, several. She sat up on her mat, confused. Vehicles did not come to their side of the village before sunrise, unless there was trouble. Outside, dogs barked wildly. Men coughed themselves awake. Children pressed against doorways. Amina opened the hut door and froze. A black SUV stood directly in front of their yard. Behind it were 2 more vehicles, clean, expensive, impossible looking against the poverty of the lane. Her first thought was fear. Had something happened? Had someone accused them of something? Then a driver stepped out and opened the rear door. A polished shoe touched the ground. Then a familiar hand. Then a familiar face. Amina's breath caught. "Mama? Nadira?" But the woman who stood before her no longer looked like the frail stranger from the roadside. She wore a rich Ankara gown. Her posture was firm. Her skin glowed with health. Her head was wrapped elegantly. And behind her stood 2 assistants, a lawyer-looking man and a woman holding a folder. The whole lane fell silent. Even Mama Zuri, standing in the doorway, forgot to cough. The old woman smiled. "This time," she said gently, "I can finally arrive properly." Amina could not move. "I don't understand." The woman stepped closer. "My name is not Mama Nadira." She paused. "My full name is Madam Nadira Kambale." The name hit the air like thunder. People in town knew that name. Even those who had never seen her face knew it. Madam Nadira Kambale was the founder of the Kambale Women's Trust, a businesswoman, a landowner, and a philanthropist whose foundation paid hospital bills, school fees, and widows' grants across several counties. The same neighbors who had mocked the old woman now stared as if they had seen a spirit step out of legend. Amina whispered, "You?" Madam Nadira nodded. "For many years I have funded programs for the poor. But I learned something painful. Money attracts performance. When people know you are rich, they become generous in ways that are really investments. So once every year, I go out quietly. I hide who I am. I observe. I ask nothing. And I wait to see who still has a human heart when there is no reward in sight." Amina felt the ground shift beneath her. Madam Nadira turned toward Mama Zuri. "You welcomed me into your home when many people with bigger houses would not even let me stand by their gate." Then she looked back at Amina. "You spent your school savings on a stranger. You gave me medicine, food, dignity, and protection. Tears burned in Amina's eyes. "I only did what anyone should do." Madame Nadira smiled sadly. "No, my child. If everyone did what they should do, the world would not look the way it does." The woman holding the folder stepped forward. Madame Nadira continued, "I did not come here empty-handed." The lawyer opened the folder. What followed felt unreal. First, Madame Nadira announced that the trust would pay all of Amina's nursing school fees through graduation. Then she said Mama Zuri would receive full medical treatment at a private hospital in town. Then came the shock that made the entire street gasp aloud. A title deed. A modest but newly renovated 3-bedroom bungalow on the outskirts of town. Registered in Amina's and Mama Zuri's names. And finally, startup capital for a small fruit and provisions store so the family would no longer survive day to day. Amina covered her mouth and began to cry. Not soft tears. Not polite tears. The kind that come from years of pressure suddenly losing somewhere to hide. Mama Zuri sank to her knees, praising God. Imani danced in circles, too young to understand documents, but old enough to understand joy. Meanwhile, outside the yard, neighbors stood in stunned disbelief. The same lane that had watched the family struggle now watched Mercy arrive, wearing expensive perfume. Madame Nadira held Amina's shoulders. "This is not charity," she said. "It is a response to character." Then she removed a small box from her bag. Inside, it was a new bracelet, gold and blue, designed like the old beaded one Amina still kept. "I left the first one as a sign," she said. "This one is for your next season." The move happened 4 days later. The bungalow was not a palace, but to Amina's family, it felt like one. It had painted walls, real windows, a roof that did not leak, a kitchen with shelves, 2 water tanks, a small compound with enough space for Mama Zuri to grow vegetables. The first night in the new house, Amina lay awake in disbelief. She kept expecting to hear rainwater dripping into bowls. Instead, she heard stillness. It felt strange, safe, luxurious even. Mama Zuri, now under proper treatment, improved quickly. Her cough reduced. Color returned to her face. Imani joined a better school. And the new shop began to attract customers, especially after people learned Madame Nadira herself had supported the family. But blessings come with tests, too. Suddenly, relatives who had disappeared during hardship began to remember blood ties. A cousin asked for a loan to start business. An uncle who had never attended their father's burial arrived claiming he wanted to guide the family in managing property. A church elder hinted that public donations might inspire others if Amina testified with envelopes attached. Amina listened, smiled, and learned. Madame Nadira had not only given them support, she had assigned a financial advisor through the trust, and that saved them from many traps disguised as affection. One evening, Madame Nadira visited the bungalow and found Amina looking troubled. "What is it?" Amina sighed. "I thought poverty was hard. I did not know provision also comes with noise." Madame Nadira laughed warmly. "Yes, need reveals enemies, but sudden change reveals actors." Then her face softened. "My child, wealth does not only attract greed from others, it can wake it inside you too. Stay careful." Amina nodded slowly. She understood. Because even in the middle of gratitude, temptation had begun to whisper. New clothes, social status, the desire to prove something to those who once mocked her. But each time pride rose, Amina remembered the clinic desk, the rain, the fainting old woman, and the price of choosing compassion before comfort. That memory kept her honest. Nursing school began in the next term. For the first time in years, Amina walked through a school gate not as someone begging for extra time, but as a registered student with books, uniforms, and transport money. She studied fiercely. Not because success now seemed possible, but because it had been purchased with sacrifice. She made few friends at first. Many of the students came from more stable homes and carried themselves with an ease Amina did not understand. But over time, her discipline stood out. She was always prepared, always respectful, and especially drawn to maternal care and emergency response. During her second term, the school partnered with the Kambale Women's Trust on a mobile health outreach program. That was where Amina met Dr. Kiano. He was young, calm, and unlike the loud men who tried too hard to be noticed. He spoke gently to patients. He listened more than he talked. And he treated cleaners, drivers, pregnant women, and village chiefs with the same steady respect. At first, Amina noticed only his professionalism. Later, she noticed how he noticed others. One afternoon during outreach, an impatient volunteer complained that villagers were too ignorant to follow instructions. Amina was about to respond when Dr. Kiano spoke first. "They are not ignorant," he said quietly. "They are underserved. There is a difference." Amina looked at him differently after that, not because he was handsome, though he was, but because compassion sounded natural in his mouth. Months passed. Their paths crossed often through the Trust's programs. They discussed patient care, village beliefs, the shortage of nurses, and the emotional cost of medicine in poor communities. There was no rushed romance, no dramatic confession, just growing respect, the kind that becomes difficult to ignore. One Saturday, after a long vaccination campaign, Dr. Kiano offered to walk Amina to the stage where she would board transport home. "You always look like you're carrying more than your bag," he said. Amina smiled. "I used to carry oranges. This is much lighter." He laughed. "You joke, but I mean it. You think deeply." Amina grew quiet. Then she said, "When life has ever only given you enough for one mistake, you learn to think deeply." He looked at her for a long second. "That may be the wisest sentence I've heard this month." She smiled again, but this time differently. Something had shifted. By the time Amina completed her training, McKenna Village no longer saw her as the poor fruit seller from the roadside. They saw a nurse, a role model, a living story. But Amina feared something dangerous hidden inside admiration. Forgetting. Forgetting the pain that shaped her. Forgetting the people still stuck where she used to stand. So when Madame Nadira asked what she wanted most after graduation, Amina did not say a car, or a wedding, or foreign travel. She said, "I want to take care back to the places that never receive it." Madame Nadira smiled proudly. That was how the Blue Bracelet Outreach Initiative was born, named after the bracelet left on a mat in a leaking hut. With support from the Trust, Amina helped launch monthly mobile clinics for roadside traders, widows, and children in low-income settlements. She became known not just for surviving poverty, but for returning to serve it. And that, more than the new house or school fees, became the true turning point in her life. Because favor may change your address, but purpose changes your name. People began to call her Nurse Amina, with a kind of affection that money cannot buy. Mama Zuri watched all this with quiet wonder. One night, while shelling beans in the kitchen, she said, "Do you know what makes me happiest?" Amina looked up. "That you are healthy?" Mama Zuri smiled. "Yes, but more than that, hardship did not make you bitter." Amina set down the knife in her hand. "Some days it tried." "I know," her mother said, "but it failed." Those words remained with Amina, because surviving pain is one victory. Surviving it without becoming cruel is another. As for Dr. Keanu, his friendship with Amina deepened naturally. He met Mama Zuri. He played football once with Imani and lost embarrassingly. He attended one of the outreach programs in McKenna and listened while old market women teased him openly. And one evening, after helping pack medical supplies into a van, he said what had clearly been growing in his heart for a long time. "Amina, I respect the woman you are. Before anything else, I want you to know that." She said nothing, but her pulse answered for her. He continued, "Your story is powerful, but it is not your story alone that draws me. It is how you carry other people's pain without turning it into performance." Amina lowered her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Not to impress her, not to flatter her, but to truly name what they saw. "I would like," he said carefully, "if you allow it, to know you beyond work and community meetings." Amina smiled softly. "You already know quite a lot. Then I would like permission to know more." This time she laughed, and in that laugh, there was room for yes. Their courtship was slow, respectful, and watched closely by the same community that had once watched Amina sell fruit in the dust. But now the watching felt different, hopeful, like people needed proof that clean love could still exist in a loud world. Over time, Keanu proved himself in ways that mattered. Not with speeches, but with consistency. He showed up. He listened to Mama Zuri. He respected Amina's work. And he never once behaved as though rescuing someone in the past made them less deserving of partnership in the future. If anything, he admired her more for it. 2 years after the black SUV first entered McKenna Village, Keanu proposed during the dedication ceremony of a new maternal care unit funded jointly by the Trust and Amina's outreach program. The clinic was named the Juma Memorial Wing, after Amina's late father. When Amina saw the signboard, tears filled her eyes. Before she could recover, Keanu stepped forward. In front of staff, community women, Madam Nadira, Mama Zuri, and a very emotional Imani, he took her hand. "Amina," he said, "you once helped a stranger when the world looked away. Since then, you have spent your life helping others stand. I would be honored to build the rest of my life beside you." There was no noise inside her then, only peace. The deep kind. The kind that arrives when life finally gives back something it once stole. "Yes," she whispered. And McKenna erupted. Women ululated. Imani jumped like a boy powered by joy alone. Mama Zuri covered her face and cried. Madam Nadira stood smiling with the satisfaction of someone who had once tested a heart and found gold inside it. Their wedding was beautiful, but not excessive. Amina chose elegance over display. She invited market women from the old roadside, clinic workers, nursing classmates, children from the outreach program. even the fried yam seller who had guarded her tray the day everything changed. During the reception, Amina gave a short speech. She thanked God. She thanked her mother. She thanked Madame Nadira. Then she said something that silenced the hall. There was a day when I thought helping one stranger had ruined my plans. I did not know God was using that moment to rewrite them. If you are here today and life has been unfair to you, please hear me. Do not let suffering train you to become heartless. Sometimes the seed that changes your life is the one you give away while you are still hungry. Many cried. Not because it sounded poetic, but because it was true. And truth, when it comes dressed in lived experience, lands differently. Years later, whenever people told the story of Nurse Amina, they often started with the black SUV. But that was never where the miracle began. It began in the rain, on a dirty roadside, when a poor girl with too many burdens and too little money knelt beside someone everyone else had decided was not worth the inconvenience. That was the real beginning. Not the house, not the school fees, not the career, not even the wedding. Just one decision, one act of mercy, one refusal to become like the world around her. And maybe that is why this story still matters. Because most people are waiting for life to change before they become good. But sometimes, goodness is the very door change walks through. So if you ever feel invisible, if you ever feel delayed, if you ever wonder whether doing the right thing still matters in a world that rewards noise and selfishness, remember Amina. Remember the roadside. Remember the woman no one wanted. And remember that some blessings do not arrive because you chase them. They arrive because, when tested in private, your heart told the truth about who you are. This story teaches a simple lesson. Never look down on people. Never mock weakness. Never assume a small act of kindness is small in the eyes of heaven. Because the person you save today may not only change your tomorrow. That moment may reveal the person you were always meant to become.